We are live. Welcome to this week's 420 Live. I'm joined by Kevin Jodrey today, founder of Wonderland Nursery. Wonderland Nursery is the first direct-to-consumer cannabis nursery in the U.S. Kevin is also a co-creator of the Ganjier Media platform, where he helped create the first cannabis sommelier program. Kevin, awesome to have you with us.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So today, I want to talk about what makes high quality cannabis. So you developed a program for defining kind of high quality cannabis, defining cannabis, and defining what makes high quality cannabis. And for me, both of us come from the medical side of things. So we both come from medical cannabis. In fact, we were in the same circles, and you were in Arcata. I was in Arcata right around the same time when you started the patient resource center. Started, as director of cultivation at the patient resource center there. So, when I believe that cannabis is medicine from having seen it and working in people's lives over the years, and I really believe that it should be treated as such. It should be grown as such. So for me, the baseline in establishing what makes a quality cannabis product is how much care was put into growing it, how much a consideration for the consumer and for the patient was put into its cultivation. Because there are there's patients out there, people that are using this as medicine, and that should always be, for me, it should always be top of mind for a cultivator that's providing cannabis to other people. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on what makes how you feel. Let me rephrase that. What makes high quality cannabis, and does growing cannabis as medicine qualify?
We all have our own definition of what is quality, but the truth of it is the end user, the customer, the medical patient, it's their definition that matters. And that's the part that's difficult, because I had to learn it myself. I didn't realize the nuances and the specificities of people who use it in these very needy medical ways, meaning that it's irreplaceable. They can't find another substance to give them the effect they need without causing some detrimental effect. And so in that process, you start to discover that there is a very big definition of what is quality, because it's all based on the individual's needs. And for some, it's the absolute best quality humanly possible. And for others, it's just pretty damn good at a really good price. And that's real, because the part about medical cannabis that I never really caught until I got into the dispensary world, in like 2008, was that most people are limited on their consumption by their financial level. And so what we wanted to be able to figure out, in that initial time, was, how do I get plants that satisfy people for some specific ailments, where we just notice the feedback statements. So when you're able to question people and ask them, like, what did you get out of this? What would you like to see? You start to be able to come up with some broad categories that let you say, these things seem to work in specific ranges, and these things limited range. And you also need to find plants that are able to be cultivated, that are positive in terms of their production numbers, so that what you're able to do is get the price points down. And so for some individuals, it's as discerning as it can be, where it's purely, I need this exact thing, this exact way. But for 90% of the people, it's not that. And so when you're looking at, like with Ganjier, when you're looking at how do you define quality, there's things that you measure and there's things that you note. And a measurement let's say a measurement would be, what is our volatility of a product? How much aroma is coming from this? Because that initial introduction triggers you in a response. And then you have things that are like trike head size. So big trike heads are great, but they also break off more easily typically. And so most of them get left in the bag from handling. But if you're a hash maker, big heads are critical.
Hmm.
If you're someone who's in flower consumption, they're not. And so that's something that has no discernible weight because it's relative to the use. But if we talk about the duration of flavor in a mouth, now that's something we can quantify. Does it last a long time? If we want to quantify layers when we consume it, how many layers do we get exposed to? Because what that does is that intrigues your mind, and it allows you to be able to get lost in the experience, which is a huge part of what we would call medicine. You're
Hmm.
trying to get people to change a state of being. And so I think that when you really look at this, there is no one answer that fits it. It's what we want is high quality cannabis at an affordable level. And the producer has to have I would call it like a noble intent. And that just means that they're more discerning to where they understand the end goal is to give somebody a product that they can use for holistic purposes. And because of it, there has to be another level above normal criteria. But to say that this particular plant or that particular plant is most valuable, it's not true. It's the values based off the individual and what
Yeah.
they desire. And then what you try to do is create a consortium, a group of plants, and you produce them consistently so that the people who found efficacy in that specific direction, they get to have that most similar response over and over again, which is really one of the big problems people have with medical cannabis is that there's very little stability crop to crop, batch to batch, farm to farm.
Hmm.
So you find something that worked for you really well, and the subtle cannabinoids or metabolites that were produced under, say, your production methodology, because I know you're a living soil, you're going to develop different attributes than someone who does, say, hydroponic.
Yep.
Now, does that mean that the person who finds efficacy in hydroponic is wrong? No. It just means they need to be really clear that that methodology produced the impact on the plant to make the plant trigger to produce the metabolites that work for them.
Hmm.
So the medical people, they need to have an understanding of how things are produced, who produces them, and the ability to keep it stable so that it allows them to be able to source it from more than just one person, and the ability for the person who's producing it to understand that once you produce a stable product, there is no more stable customer than a medical consumer.
Hmm.
Because
That's
once
true.
they find something that works, they stick with it.
They want that forever. Yeah.
They want that forever because their ailment is alleviated from that
Yeah.
situation. And so like there's this balancing line you got to walk, but at the end of the day, the producer has to care enough to understand that compromised cannabis isn't meant for people who have medical needs, anyone really.
Yeah.
But medical
Anyone.
needs I would just take to a higher level because it's an irreplaceable component. If you smoke because you like to smoke, that's great. But if you smoke and if you don't smoke and you have to take 11 different pills, that's a radically different level of need. And I weigh that person as not more valuable, but considerations have to be created for that higher level need.
I would think that all cannabis should be produced to that level, because you don't, how
A
is the
base
producer
level.
going to
Yeah, no, there
know?
has to be a
How are they
base
going to
level.
know if a patient is going to consume or somebody's just taking it
Nope.
recreationally or if somebody's taking this for a real need? You don't know. So
Nope, but it's in
pretty much have to
cultivar
produce it.
selection.
Yeah.
Cultivar selection is where that's determined. So there's things that work for the marketplace that have very specific numbers, very specific metrics that work.
Mm.
That's just the reality of it. And people get upset with the legal cannabis world because you're not satisfied. And the problem is the people who are producing it aren't satisfied either. They're in an absolute meat grinder of an industry that is unbelievably expensive to be in with very low margins. So it's kind of hard to rise to this unbelievably, heroic level when you're being financially beat to death every day. And I always look at people and say, and what are you doing in your personal life that's so unbelievable when you're struggling? And most people are like, well, I'm struggling. And I'm like, well, they're struggling too. So there's got to be, some balance. But for me, it's always been the same thing. Every single human being that consumes cannabis should have a baseline of consideration where you know that there's no pathogenic issues that are going to cause you problems. You do not have any types of molds or funguses present. There was no toxicity. And I don't mean the shit on the COA. I mean the stuff that's not on the COA.
Yeah.
You're not being clever and creative and finding things that aren't being looked at. It's food grade. And for me, it's easy because I always pretend I'm giving it to my kid. Right. And that way
Yep.
it makes it simple. And I'm like, would I give it to my kid? And what that does is it just allows you to operate at a little higher level. Well, COAs are a joke, but to agree they're not. They at least tell you something. And someone says there should be all those things. I'm like, okay, get ready for $100,000 COA because the list could go on for 400 pages, right? So it's impossible. But COAs do tell you certain things. Especially if I've had 10,000 lab samples go to my hand. They tell you something very specific. They tell you about, especially if it's the same lab. So what we look at is not so much the perfect accuracy, but the range of accuracy and the range that we operate within it, meaning batch to batch, what's my standard of deviation? And if my deviation is all over the place, then that's not what I'm seeking. And so if we're not looking at the system and its broken function, but we're looking at it as a producer who uses labs to do analysis, right? So I got lucky. I've been involved in the lab game forever. It allowed me to be able to figure out optimization on the farm. And we're even talking organically. What gave me the best product in terms of consistency, numerically, and experientially through the mouth when we smoked it, and the effect wise. And it starts to allow you to understand how you become a better cultivator. If you don't have any data to copy and follow, how do you improve? You have to have something. What do you just measure it by weight or by feel it? No, you got to be able to use a whole series of metrics. And the series of metrics help you kind of refine your process. So what we want to be able to use the tools as producers so that we can make sure we stabilize what we're doing and see where we get the best results. But the problem with these is that, they're full of loopholes. And when you're talking about commoditized cannabis, which is really the world we're in right now, it's exploited tremendously. And it makes it very difficult. There's scandals all over the place. If the best COA story I have is I've been doing this for so long that I remember when labs first came out. And at that time, all the OGs that I had in the library was 17, 16.5, maybe 17.8. And that was the number. And somehow miraculously, they all steered up to about 32, 33% today. And I laughed, right? Because I said, oh my God, I got so much smarter. And I know I didn't. I just know that and it's about manipulation of moisture levels and how you play with the calibrations. And all of those things make it confusing. But if I can utilize a COA as a producer and I have the same lab touch it every time, it lets me see trends and it lets me understand how my production impact works. And it allows me to be able to see specifically minor cannabinoids, right? So we're obsessed with numbers for sales. You can't get into a storefront if it isn't over 22, 24, right? So you can't even sell the shit.
Unfortunately.
So the problem is that numbers definitely matter if you're trying to sell per pot. But what we want, for me personally, is I want to be able to see the consortium of cannabinoids present so that I'm able to better understand the nuances of why somebody likes it and why they don't, so that when I can speak to that person, they can help me understand what benefits they derived and why they derived them. And then it allows me to be able to listen and remember. And then when the next person comes in that says, hey, I have spasm issues, and you're able to say, hey, we had a product that worked really well. Let me see if we have that product. And if not, let's see if we have something that lines up similar. Because what I noticed was it had unusual levels of these trace cannabinoids that some of these don't. And so what happens is there is no super genius in cannabis as much as everyone wants to be one. We're basically fumbling along because all the real information of how to use cannabis holistically was removed from our society due to illegalities, right?
Yep.
So now what you have is very siloed situations where, each person believes that they're the best producer. Each person believes that their customers are the happiest. Well, I notice as soon as they leave that room, that shit doesn't apply anymore. So therefore, it can't be true. So what we need is we need to expect the fact that we're all trying to do a reasonably good job, and that we're trying to work with science to the best degree possible to understand the whys. Why did people benefit from that? What are the cannabinoids and what ratios, and what metabolites at what ratios that seem to trigger these things? And how do we take that information and use it to benefit the people that have need? And I think that's always, like we talked about earlier, like about quality and stuff. It's intent, but people can have great intent, still screw everything up. Just because you trying hard doesn't mean you're doing. And so it has to be, how do we do the best we can and improve our process continuously? When someone says 30 years and still learn, the deeper I go down into this hole, the farther from the
The more there
bottom
is to learn.
I'm finding myself, right? So I think I understand what I've done perfectly because it's my life. But does that mean that I understand cannabis to this profound degree? No. I think I see patterns exceptionally well. And I think that I've had an unusual amount of people through my fingers globally. And it allows me to be able to get their information. But all it does is it just lets me know that we're in this sea of knowledge and we're basically catching a thimble. And what we're trying to do is just admit that. And I think that's the hard part, is that nobody wants to admit that they're not the end all be all. And what we have to say is, hey, I only know so much. I know this much. And if I could listen to you and you explain to me how you benefited what you did, then between all of us, we can start to really find maybe some truths. And it's in that process, that humility of admitting that you're not the end all be all, and you're trying to discover and trying to do it collaboratively, that I think that for me, being involved in medical cannabis, I think that that lesson that I learned about bringing people into my life and allowing them access into the space, allowing them access into the nursery, allowing them access into the production facilities, that was what was easily 50% of their fight, because the medical problems they had made them feel like they were no longer valuable in society and that they didn't have any place. And a lot of times it was people with, like, I want to say AIDS, people with Hep C, things that, like, I call them pariah diseases, where when you got them, nobody gets near you.
Mm.
And this shit isn't going to jump on you. And so I used to let people that had these problems populate my space.
Mm.
And it was controversial. And I said, we're not sharing saliva, bodily fluids, blood, nothing. We're simply working in a space together, and they're human beings. And what they need is to feel like they're human beings. And instead of just selling them weed or giving them weed, give them a place where they can participate and be part of the human race in a way that we would all want. You know, like, nobody wants to be isolated involuntarily. So you may like privacy, but nobody wants to be stuffed in the corner because unfortunately they did something that punished them with a life-threatening disease.
Mm.
And I don't believe that I'm someone who has the ability to judge or punish you. That's not my role in life.
Mm.
It's my role is to try to be a decent human being to the best degree I can, so that I get to be that. And it's altruism. I want to be part of something positive. So, like, for me, I need it. I need to be part of positive things too, so that I feel like I have a purpose. Otherwise, what are we here for? And I don't judge other people that don't have that same desire. It's just, that's who you are. It's what you do. But for me, with medical cannabis, what I did differently was I opened the doors up to a world that most people had never been able to touch and see. And we allowed them to populate our world and be supported and be part of things. And if they were too poor, we subsidized it. If they were too sick, we subsidized it. And what it did was it just allowed there to be these beautiful moments of humanity that I think were some of the most richest moments of my life outside of the time I spent with my family. You know what I mean? Like, there are people that you have no expectation of return, but the expectation is that you get to enjoy watching people who are basically giving up
Yeah.
find value.
And find hope, finding
Yeah,
hope
it's
for.
beautiful. And well, they know most of them know they're dying. And I'm honest with it. Like, I don't have to pretend that and I tell them all the time, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm just me. But
Yeah.
what I will promise you is I won't abandon you in this struggle. So if you just need to come in and sit in my office, man, there's a chair. Like, I can't give you 10 hours of my day every day, but I can give you that chair every day. I can give you access into other people who also, because all the people I worked with, all the coworkers, all my employees, all the friends, they were all really similar. So it allowed there to be not just me being somebody, but it was many that allowed people to find who they connected with spiritually, so that they were able to form these little beautiful micro friendships that may only lasted for the 40 minutes you were in the building twice a week. But if you bumped into that person in the street, it was real. And while you were in that facility, you were able to kind of hold on to it. It does start with culture, but culture, ironically, some of these words didn't come into vogue until the first industrial revolution, right? So same thing with craft, right? Craft did not exist in its contextual form until the first industrial revolution, right? Craft originally meant strongman. And culture, there was no need to define it. It was when it started getting removed from the industrial revolutions. So the industrial revolutions replace people so effectively, it creates such an emotional blowback that it spurns an evolution of these microcultures that scream about we're being removed. And it only lasts as long as it takes for the generation that was young to grow up, because for them, they're used to that new norm. And so if you look at each industrial revolution, you can see these craft and cultural explosions, and each one of them lasts less and less time because each revolution is going quicker and quicker and quicker. So, I mean, I went down this rabbit hole too. And because I wanted to understand it, I wanted to understand the words we use and the connotation and the denotation of them, because they're so overused. And I'm not saying that, you're wrong, because I'm saying culturally, the culture that we hold on to is the cannabis culture from say, the 70s,
Mm.
where it was quiet, people were cool, and when you smoked, it made you happy, and you didn't see any bad things occur from cannabis compared to other things. And good herb was valuable, and people who produced it were valuable.
Mm.
And there was this appreciation for those details. That is my, upbringing in the world of cannabis. So I still hold that dear to my heart. I just know that that is a dated belief from my age. And I know that with kids of today, what's the first thing they want is good looking. And when you tell them they're wrong, you're wrong, because you're defining someone else's experience based on your preferences. And that is not your privilege in life, to tell others what they should and shouldn't like, or should and shouldn't do. It just does. Change happens. And so in the world of 2025, visual for these people is the most important, because it's how they live through the phone. And so, like, once you see this, you start to go, I got you. If I want to sell to younger people coming in, I need to make sure it fits their needs. And in the process of me bending to fit their need, they're willing to bend to listen to you and be exposed to other things. But when you tell somebody they're wrong, I don't care who it is, they instantly get defensive, and that's done. There's no communication.
Yeah.
But if I can say, you're not wrong, because I'm telling you that my belief is right, that's to me the opposite of weed. That herb is acceptance, herb is tender, herb is non-prejudicial, herb doesn't care about your sex, herb doesn't care about your race, herb doesn't care about your religious belief, herb doesn't care about your money. Herb seems to like people getting along when they consume it and creating beautiful relationships. And that seems to be the one truth that I found around the earth, that no matter how dissimilar, when we consume together or consume in presence of each other, the vibe is always really healthy and positive.
Mm.
And to me, that is as much medical cannabis, top quality cannabis, as anything, because the experience dictates it. It does. It brings us closer. And I always say the same thing, that cannabis to me is this golden thread that weaves dissimilar societies together.
Hmm.
And I'm just grateful that I get to be involved in it because it allowed me to weave a lot of beautiful people into my life that I wouldn't have met. And when I see mainstream people wanting to be, it wants to be spread around. And it manipulates us through its intoxicant to spread it. So and Dwight knows this, there's a point where you realize that you're not in control, it's in control. And it's definitely a higher level plant. It's probably the greatest bioreactor of any plant we've ever discovered. Its complexity is unparalleled, and its ability to mimic, match, change, adjust, adapt is unbelievable. And yes, they're farming us. I do believe that. I
It's a
believe
great way
that
to live.
they're manipulating and creating, and that we just aren't smart enough to understand it. And when I was young, I never thought I was going to get involved in plant culture. And I think a lot of it was because I didn't know how to listen. I didn't understand that with plants, you had to listen with different senses. And you had to take your time and allow it to unfold. And once you start to slow down and let that unfold, you change. It shapes you and you become a better person. And most people that are cultivators, fundamentally, if you're doing it long enough, you're pretty humble because you definitely made some mistakes and you're definitely learning all the time. And so there's no way you can't admit it. It's people who don't work continuously that think they mastered that shit. You know what I mean? Like I can tell if you're saying like, and I don't have anything against the word master because master, I'll give you a good one. When you were a journeyman in a craft, it meant that you could get paid and you could work, but it didn't mean you could have your own shop. And so in order for you to have your own shop and run a project, you had to create something called like your master thesis, your masterpiece, your magnum opus. All of those things were projects that you did that you released into the public and let people determine, have you reached mastery of your craft? And if you have voted yes, you are now allowed to be a master. And so I have no issue with the word master grower or master cultivator because when I was in the military, see, people don't like it, but I was in the military and you have a master diver. Like I used to work for master diver. Oh, fuck yeah, they were a master diver. My grandfather was a master electrician. Oh, he definitely was a master electrician.
Yeah.
So I worked with all these different individuals in craft and trade that designated apprentice, journeyman, master based off of your ability level. And master simply meant the ability to run a project. Journeyman fundamentally means you have an ability to operate independently. An apprentice has to be watched every step of the way. And it's no one is a master. It's old thinking, in my opinion. But what do you say your whole life? You're gonna tell me like Michelangelo didn't say he was a master. Oh shit. Then and what do you define him as? Like really? There's a point where you're competent to run a project. So if any craft, any trade, you become certified at a level. Now, does that mean that they stop learning? No, but people put the word master on it and they say that like it's like a period
Yeah.
dot done, and
Yeah.
it's not. It just simply states that you are qualified to run a project. And so it like in terms of setting up nursery operations, I think I'm fairly, who defines it? The public. The public defines it. You don't define it. The public does. You have to put your piece to work. And if the public screams, you know what you're doing, you have mastered that craft.
Yeah.
Does that mean it's not a process to death? No, but the public does.
Yes.
Your peers do. Other people do. Do other people listen to you? Do the things you do? See, some of them, yeah, like, the whole joke about masturbator and stuff. And I think it's funny, but many of them are not. But your work will speak for itself.
Mm.
But what do they call you? He's just a student. I guess nice. There has to be a level of mastery. If you follow like athletics, right? It's mastery ranks in Russia. All European rankings for all sports are this level of mastery.
Well, for a gardener, there's a master gardener that you
I'm a
have to
master gardener through
yeah,
UC
you have
Berkeley,
to
right?
have a
I took
certain level
national
of
garden tech at
competency.
UC Berkeley. And what does that mean in English? It means that I have an ability to communicate the language that's been approved by the university. So that's what it means. It doesn't mean anything other than that. It just says that when someone calls the hotline, I could go to the ag department. I could sit on a hotline. I could answer a question and say, the UC, their guidelines state this. That's all it means. But I don't get caught up in it because I don't put the word master on my stuff. But like in athletics, master sport is a Russian rank for my proficiency. My son is international master of sport. That shit isn't poo-pooed, and Russians own the word sport. That's a Russian word. The Russian athletic development has been unparalleled. No one spent more money. And no one in Russia I've been there multiple times. My son's a high-level weightlifter, right? So you start to play around, and it's how we have connotation and denotation. And what's that? The question is at state level, what qualifies as a knowledge level acceptable to be a bud tender? That's a good question. Put a line across that and divide it by price and paycheck. And now talk to me about how smart you need to be for minimum wage. Because I want to see everybody that critiques bud tenders. I'm always like, oh, let me see what you do for a living. And now let me get a couple guys in the room that do that too. And let's see how much you really know. Because I
It's a
can't
tough gig.
stand that bullying shit, man. You have the lowest paid job and you have to know some ungodly information. Fuck, I own 2
You
dispensaries,
have to
right?
be a bit of a nurse or even a
Ah,
doctor for people.
and how can anybody be that to the degree that everyone will be happy,
yeah.
right? It's impossible. And I'm like, look, you go to the supermarket and you ask the checkout clerk, where's the barbecue sauce? He tells you aisle 7. You bring it up to him and you're like, tell me what type of process they use to make it. And he's like, how the hell would I know? I just know where it's at and I know what it costs. Oh, you're a total failure in your job. No
Well,
one does that.
Kevin,
They tell you to shut up
I
because,
wanted to get back to before we
yeah,
run out of time, Kevin. I wanted
we
to
went
get
on a
back.
tangent, but you got me on
I
that
want
one, man.
That was a good one. There's all kinds of definitions for master. Sometimes people think of master like you have to know absolutely
Yeah,
everything
master
about
skilled.
every single detail about every parameter that could possibly exist about the whatever art or whatever it is. Not You're saying not necessarily the case. You have to be able to run a project. You have to be able to have a solid understanding of the
Yes.
terminology,
You're
etc.
competent.
Yeah,
You're competent in a managerial level.
yeah.
And that's what it means historic. I mean, I went down the rabbit hole on this stuff just so that I could understand contextually how do we really communicate to other industries.
Mm.
It's kind of like strain and cultivar, right? It's we use strain. We all understand what it means, but you're talking to somebody who's working with microbiology, and it's a radically different word. And so it comes down to context. What are we saying? What does it mean? How are we implying it? And will it be heard and mean the same thing to the audience you're speaking to? And I think that that's like what the Ganjier mission was so much, was to kind of try to standardize some of our language, but in a way that enough of us that put it together, it was 18 of us that put it together.
Mm.
Um, what is pretty reasonable. And we also have to understand that the the level of knowledge we have today is not necessarily very deep. And
Yeah.
as new information comes, it'll supersede. And we have to be willing to say that. We have to be willing to say, look, today we know this much and we have some understanding, and we can look at some, historical patterns a couple thousand years back if you get to go to Asia and see how they've functioned and operated. But it doesn't tell you the science behind it, so that it allows you to be able to better understand and explain to people who need that explanation. So not everybody needs high science.
Mm.
Cultivar is too many symbols, but but the thing is that cultivated variety works for plant work. And so when I was doing all the greenhouse work in normal greenhouse world, that's where I really started using the word, because it's a plant that's been selected for production, right?
Mm.
Specifically, that's what it defines as. So we use these words to define so that when we're in certain groups, you don't have to deal with you're using the wrong language, which automatically invalidates the rest of what you say.
Mm.
And if you're someone who does a lot of communication, you have to make sure you're cautious with the words you use so that the audience that's listening to it, you're on the same page.
Mm.
And what we want is not to be right. what we want to be able to do is be present. We want to be able to be present with the audience so that we can work together to find what's right. And so if I'm getting brought in to give a lecture on a topic, I research it. And like if I'm, and I mean, I research it. It allows me to move around in a way that is comfortable.
Mm.
That allows there to be sharing of information because not everybody picks it up the same. And if I can give it to you in 10 different ways, but it means the same thing, then we get it. And then once we get it, we can all start to say, hey, it's okay that we all understand. But that the parable of Babel is pretty powerful. They couldn't, and they were going to build the tower to the heavens, but God said, hey, you're getting cocky. I'm going to make you talk different languages, and none of you are going to go anywhere. And that to me is cannabis, is that we're so caught up in who's best and who's right that we invalidate everyone else's behavioral beliefs, their technology, their selections, what they do. And I'm like, look, I'm not invalidating anybody. I just know what I like.
Yeah, as if we aren't up against enough in this industry. But I wanted to bring it back, Kevin. We have a few minutes left. I wanted to bring it back to talking about high quality cannabis and what that definition is and what makes it. We started talking about medical cannabis and how, for me and for potentially you as well, for people who worked with patients, growing a medical quality product without contaminants, without pesticides sprayed on it, et cetera, things that could harm the patient, would be a starting point for judging quality. Because after that, we have, okay, well, you can start talking about strains. Well, everybody has different biochemistry. Everybody responds to the compounds in cannabis differently. So that's going to be very subjective. You can start talking about potency. People like different potency. Some people like very high potency. Some people enjoy low potency all day long. So that's very subjective as well. But as a starting point, clean cannabis would be just the baseline for me judging
100%.
quality.
Mandatory. All human beings, period, should not have to consume cannabis that's been tainted with any adulterants. And for some individuals, even organic methodologies aren't well. Some people have reactions to neem, and so it depends on what you use. To me, I just discovered for myself that I like biological pest control. I like using other pests to control pests.
Yeah.
And then I think the cannabis expresses itself best through organic methodologies, through natural sun. But for a lot of people, they don't have that ability. So that doesn't mean they have bad cannabis. It just means they have to work a little harder to dial in their process to get the plant to perform the way they want, or they have to select plants that perform better under those requirements. So you have this process of discovery that businesses can't really do with the profit margin we have now. The old era of medical cannabis, there was a lot of dirty herb. Like, just be really clear. Like, I mean, I was looking at samples constantly, filthy. But
the people who were really in it and really providing directly
were
to patients had that motto of do no harm.
Yes.
Right?
And what they also did was they didn't go after what we would call commoditized cannabis. They went for varieties that they believed had the best efficacy for the people they served. And we don't have that now. That's the real issue to me in legal cannabis, is that you don't have the diversity of choice because things that don't register to what is seen as marketable, valuable, just don't make it. And I just know that I don't judge you if you're running what you're running. You do it the best you can, and you just do the best you can the whole time. And if you can do that, and you have a product that's clean, and you have a product that was grown, by you, usually you're pretty happy with the choices that you make. It's when you buy the product that there's issues. But if you could home grow, if you could get support like groups like this, where you get people together that want to talk about the ideas and concepts and methodologies and tools, choices where you get the things from, it's incredible. It's like I see Dwight on, I follow Dwight because I respect the hell out of him, right? But what it does, it allows me to go dive into Dwight's world. And I recognize some of the other names too. So if I recognize your name, it means that I've read your stuff. Like I've read a comment from you, or I wouldn't know your name. It means that there must be some reason why I look at it and see it. And what it does is it's an emotional connection. You know what I mean? It allows you to be able to find kinship And in that, you're able to reach out and communicate so you can improve your situation. And that's the beauty of the cannabis community when you really put it, on a platform and look at it. Oh, you're welcome, Dwight. I just respect the hell out of you, man. I respect your skills and stuff, but I like the way you treat people online. I don't like people abusing people, and I don't like the platform being used like that. I don't dig it.
Mm.
And I just like people who are, even if there's conflict, you slow it down and say, "I thank you for your opinion." Because you don't, when you go ad hominem and attack people, I'm just like, man, you got no self control, and all you're doing is cultivating more people to behave like that, and
And
that's
we've
not,
been we've
to
been
me,
struggling for
that's
we've been
not herb.
struggling for decades to come out of this stigma as well as an industry, and it just looks poorly on our industry. I want to try to lift people up. I want to try to help people find this plant, and find help and health and happiness through it. So,
And you
um,
did. That's why I'm
yeah,
on. That's why I'm here. I know who you are, because it allows me to enjoy good times with people. It lets me hang out and share some really just good energy. And I think that in our world that we're in right now, it's critical because the world is crazy. But cannabis in general, it became so commoditized and it's so restrictive that every step forward with legalization in so many ways was a step backwards for people who needed it in the medical aspect.
mm,
The most needy got screwed. So I mean, the irony of it is just, it's profound when you really look at it. And that's why what you have to do is you have to be able to share the info and be willing to take the challenge on it. It's not that, and I don't think anybody is the omnipotent character in the field we're in. I think that it's all of us combined that create the value. And I'm very opinionated on certain things, but I'm like, well, you go sell a couple million plants and you can talk to me about selling plants, right? Then I'll listen. But otherwise, you doing 5 plants doesn't really mean we can have a conversation and argue.
mm,
We can have a conversation,
yeah,
but you're trying to tell me that your experience is comparable. It's not. And it's just like when I talk to people that manage 5 million square foot of canopy, their ability to do that means that they have a specific skill set, and you have to recognize that. And so there's things that just can't be argued with because it's just real. You're jumping a 10 foot in the air, I'm jumping 2 foot in the air, and I'm trying to give you a jumping lesson. It doesn't make any sense. But when it comes to like working together, there is no rank at
mm.
all. It's purely human. And I think that, the because I'm over here reading all the comments. That's what I like to see. It's people that are engaging and enjoying conversation and throwing their own opinion up of what they believe or disbelieve and how they see it. And that's the beauty of the platform, is you can do that without being attacked,
Mm.
whether it's right or wrong. Because none of us, I said, are the end all be all of this world. The cannabis is too big, and that's what I
Yeah,
love about it. It's
I
so
think,
complex that there
yeah,
is no king, just one
there's so
queen. And I and
so
I
much
like
to learn.
the boy plants too because I breed. But
Yeah, I think it comes down to quality cannabis. It starts with care, with the care that's put into the cultivation of the plant. There's the
yeah,
beginning.
and the idea that the people who receive it should be able to know that there is nothing in the product that is detrimental to them. If they don't like the product, they don't like the chemotype, they don't enjoy the metabolites, well then they can switch and
There's a
adjust.
million different ones to
There's a
find.
million different ones, but when it comes down to you're doing sneaky shit, you're taking dirty herb and remediating it,
Yeah,
you're doing all this crazy stuff, and I'm just like, wait a minute, like didn't we already go through this? Like that was what was, the old era of herb coming. I remember going to other countries and watching them. Shit, I saw dudes spraying paraquat on the ground around the crops in other
yeah,
countries, and I laughed and said, "Holy shit, you can still buy that!" And it was paraquat in the container, and I was like, "Wow, you have some risk if you're not knowing who's producing your product."
yeah. Even in the medical field, or look,
Yeah.
I've been talking to people in Germany, for instance, about their medical program. It's basically a few large producers that aren't doing the best job, and then they import the rest from MSOs, folks in Canada, remediated weed, and it's not what medicinal cannabis should be, but it's under the guise of a medical program. So just because it's called medical doesn't even mean that it's going to be
No,
high
no,
quality.
it's medical and recreational is just some bullshit to make politicians happy. If once you start to like, I've been involved in dealing with this crap for a long time at a different level because of what I did in the state of California. So it put me into a political whirlwind that was crazy. And it let me understand one key thing, that politicians and regulators only concern is to get reelected and stay in their job. And I don't fault them. No one wants to lose a job. But when you allow there to be abuse that's rampant and you tolerate it so that you can stay in your job, it makes me like you don't deserve the job. And so the problem is that it's like the definitions between, hemp and cannabis. These are all words used so that you
Yeah.
can separate and isolate
And
and
so,
yeah, well, what it does is it takes all of us that are producers that are involved in cannabis and it segregates us. It's kind of like saying, you're less than human because you're Asian. I'm more human because I'm white. The whiter I am, even more power I have. So if I look like I'm made out of ivory, I'm the most powerful. And I look at this stuff, and I mean, it's been going on historically forever. And I'm just like, at some point, somebody put this shit down, but they can't because it's entrenched. And what we need change that only generations moving forward can change. And it's in conversations like this that you get the change because people could listen to it and say, this was a reasonable conversation. Nobody's screaming at each other about who's right or wrong. What we're saying is what comes out of the conversation, mostly the intention of the producer. And that intention is, I would rather see the crop become compost than give it to somebody if it was contaminated.
yeah,
Because you can compost it and it's just fine. Compost is
yeah,
great. Man, shit, if you're in California, we've all composted cannabis, right? Because it's just what it is. Like the new world of cannabis is you got too much cannabis. The market can't take it. It ages.
mm,
There is no use for it. It's pillow stuffing.
mm,
So you compost it. But then that's clean cannabis. But if it's dirty and you know it, you get rid of it. And the problem is the economic considerations always overshadow that. And that's,
it always has.
yeah, and that's the nature of the world we're in because we put money at such a high rank over everything else that with enough money, nothing else matters.
Mm,
And at the end of the day, that really has nothing to do with your medical condition, your
yeah,
medical need, and your compassionate end. You got people that, like I said, if they want to be involved to get a better dose of what we call like spirituality, and they get to be involved in a process to produce, and in that process, they're doing things that are dirty, that are wrong. That's not helping them either because now they have moral conflict. So it's
yeah. As Dwight was saying, it's about intent as well, and the
yeah,
care that you
yeah.
put into it.
Well, someone said, you can't compost it because they're going to get it. You're living up in the mountains and you got a farm. You just compost it. What we got to do is we got to render it unusable. So it means you have to grind it and then you got to mix it with soil, right? So you got to
Mm,
you got to make it to where it's unfucking usable. But the point is that we take clean herb and grind it because what are you going to do with the extra units that the market didn't want?
mm,
And you just grind them. And now some people sell them out, but like for me, with the irony of it is that, for all the years I was doing in illicit sales, when I really got into medical and I got into like licensed, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to combine the two worlds.
mm,
And it's too complicated because what I want is I want the farm to stay a farm. I don't want to lose the farm because I did some stupid shit.
mm,
And so you have to play a really different game and you got to control canopy. You got to be able to figure out how much you do. And it just is a really odd reality from us that when we basically could sell all we produced. And now you're in a world where you got, machines, and I call them machines because they're factories, but they're putting out 500, 600,000 pounds. And I salute them for their efficiency. But the thing is, you're just flowing so much herb into a system and it's destroying anybody that is trying to operate on a higher level of what we would say conscious care. Yeah, lawnmower. Yeah, grind that shit up, run it through. We had at the HBRC, we had shredders. We bought shredders, and we would run shit through the shredder so that nothing was done. And it's funny because I used to catch the homeless going through the dumpster. They'd cut holes through the dumpster. So I waited one night to see what the fuck are they doing, and I catch them. And it's like 3 a.m. I said, "What are you guys doing?" And they said, "There's crumbs in here." And I said, "You got to be kidding me! You're crawling through a dumpster looking for weed crumbs." I said, "Listen," I said, "that shit's embarrassing. And I'm embarrassed that we're making you do it." I said, "What I'm going to do is you just can't say anything, so I'll get in trouble. But I'll make sure I don't grind it all up, and I'll hide you a bag behind the dumpster, and I'll hide you the edibles too, right? So you can't expect it, but every night you check, and if it's there, then you have it." And I
You're a
said,
real one, Kevin Jodrey.
I
You're
try,
a real
man,
one,
because
man.
I'm just like, nobody should have to do that. You shouldn't have to demean yourself for a bag of weed that you got to crawl into a dumpster for 3 hours to get half a joint. And I'm like, and we're over here doing all this crazy crap over these restrictions, and there's needy people that it's kind of like, when you're throwing food away, it must be thrown away. It still has another couple days of use. Because if I would eat it, then I would share it with you. But if I wouldn't eat it, then I'd say it's not edible.
Mm.
But the point is, we create this criteria, and what it does, it constantly segregates the most needy, and it allows. And I have my own opinion on it, but I believe it so that, especially the U.S., we have to cultivate people to hate, so we feel better about ourselves, and so we make it so that the lower classes are always really, really screwed up, so that we can point and say, "Ha, we're not them." And I laugh because I'm like, you're a lot closer to them than you are the people you idolize, right? Like your financial level is one step above them, and you're about 1,000 steps below the people you pray to. So, like, be really clear. Your people are those people. They just had one or two things that forced them into a bad situation, and a lot of them mental health issues. I mean, I dealt with homeless for years. We put all the bathrooms in. We used to do all this homeless outreach. And it was just because I just couldn't get over the fact that you didn't have water and that you had to go, crap in a parking lot. I'm like, this isn't the world I had hoped to grow up into. I was like, whoa, I thought I grew up wild. I was like, I thought this would be a better development, and we got more harsh.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Mark. Enjoy.
Thanks, Mark. Well, Kevin, we are running out of time. We could hold this conversation for a lot longer.
Oh yeah, we
feel,
can go.
but
I'd love to get on. If you want to get into another one about like some specific cultivation stuff or anything like
yeah,
that, like a defined topic, man, we can go
yeah,
dive down. So I really enjoyed your crew that's on the show, and I
yeah.
really enjoy speaking to you. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So, and thank you to all the subscribers of Home Growers International. Thanks for joining us today, for all the great questions and feedback, everyone. And we will see you next week.
Fantastic.
All
Peace.
right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.